Hello, and welcome to the A Quilting Life podcast. I'm Sherri McConnell from A Quilting Life. You'll notice that I'm here in my sewing room today instead of in our podcast studio, and also Chelsea is not with me. Billy is here, however, and we have a special interview for you today, so that's why things are just a little bit different here. I'm going to just start out and mention our appreciation for our sponsor, Cozy Earth. We love all of their products, their comfy towels, their temperature regulating sheets, their cozy joggers and socks. It's cooling down here finally, and able to wear our joggers and socks and love everything Cozy Earth. Just want to remind you that you can get 40% off at Cozy Earth using our link, or check out with the code Quilting Life and mention that you saw it here on the podcast. Okay, so just really one quick what's new with Sherri and Chelsea before I jump into telling you about our podcast guests. But I just want to remind you that our family favorite sew along did begin last Thursday. So you'll need the book. It's a pretty casual sew along. We're just making a couple blocks a month. It is going to go throughout into 2025. And it's just going to be so much fun. We've already shared a video where you'll be able to see my first two blocks and Chelsea's first two blocks for the sew along, and just really want to encourage all of you to sew along. The quilt in the book is made with Laguna Sunrise, and there are kits available from Fat Quarter Shop, so we'll have that link for you as well. Okay, just a little bit back into today's episode. Billy and Chelsea and I are all at Quilt Market today as this is airing. So this is the final day of International Quilt Market in Houston. And so we did tape this a few weeks ago so that we would have a fun interview to share with you on the podcast. My guest is Nancy Lane, and she is an incredible quilter. I've talked about her before on the podcast, so if you listen, you might have heard her name mentioned before. She is on Instagram at Treehouse Quilts. We'll put a link to that in the description. But I actually met her in Southern California when I was teaching at her guild back in 2023, and she has been doing some sewing for me. Her sewing, her piecing is incredible. She has a wonderful story about her years that she spent working for Disney, which is super interesting. And then she has some fabulous quilt tips to share. So be sure to stay tuned all the way to the end, because one of her best tips is pretty close to the end of our conversation, and it inspired me to make a change at my sewing machine. So I know you're going to love this episode with Nancy. She is just incredible. I've been able to meet her in real life several times, and I have learned a lot from her, and I know you'll find her story interesting, inspiring, and educational.
One producer note I want to mention real quick, and I don't even have a camera on me today, but I was just listening in on the interview doing producer stuff, but I had to jump in one time to ask her a follow-up question. I wasn't planning on it. So the problem is with our software is that it didn't record what I said because I was the producer, not one of the guests. So you won't be able to hear my question, but essentially what it was, I just was asking more about what she did at Disneyland with the whole costume design. I didn't know if she did actual like characters or just dresses and things like that. So that's the question that was asked that unfortunately didn't get recorded, but she does go ahead and answer it. So I just wanted to mention that to everyone real quick.
Yeah, and it was so great that Billy jumped in and asked that question, because it really prompted a lot more details that were super interesting about her job, and a couple stories that she told came from that question. Okay, good morning, Nancy. It is so good to have you on camera, and we've been talking about doing this interview for a little while now, and just so happy to have you here today. Just thought maybe you could kind of just give a really short introduction to yourself, and then I have all of these questions that I've sent over that I think our listeners are going to want to hear. So
It's great to be here today with you, Sherri. I just love the quilting journey that you've been on, and it's really inspired me with my quilting journey. So I've been a little bit about myself. I live here in Orange County, California, with my husband. I have actually a blended family, so I actually have 5 kids and four daughter-in-laws, and 2 grandkids. And it's just I love where I live. I'm about 20 minutes from the beach, and it's a perfect place to go and walk and be inspired. And I just love where we're at. So that's a little bit about where I'm at and what my family is all about.
awesome. Thank you. Yes, I love where you're at too. It's one of my favorite places in the whole world. And that kind of leads to how I met Nancy. I actually went and visited her quilt guild, the Beach Cities Quilt Guild, 2 years in a row. And I didn't meet you the first time I went,
No.
right?
Mm-mm,
No.
mm-mm.
So, but the second time that I went in the spring of 2023, Nancy took my class, and I don't know, it was a big class, and all of the women were wonderful, and actually the whole guild is wonderful, and that's really primarily why we went back, because we were so impressed with the humanitarian charity arm of that guild. The first time we were there, we just had never seen anything quite like it. And so when we were asked to go back, we were super excited to go back. And your guild just, I don't know, maybe later, I didn't put that on the outline, but we should probably talk about that before the end, because your guild does such incredible service
Yes.
with quilts. But yeah, let's just start out, and maybe you could tell us about your quilting journey, your quilting life. And because Nancy has some really interesting facets of her journey.
Well, before I start talking about quilting, I'll kind of tell you a little snippet about how I started to sew, because then that
Okay.
leads into my quilting journey. So I've been sewing since I probably was 7 or 8 years old. But the thing that changed my life was when I was young. My parents took me to Disneyland, and I love Disneyland. And they took me on It's a Small World. I saw all those little dolls dressed up, and I remember getting off that ride and telling my mom, you know what, I'm going to work at Disneyland one day. I am going to make those clothes for all those
Wow.
dolls. And, I don't think my family took me seriously, but I went home and I was sewing even before that, making doll clothes. But then I really started sewing a lot. And I was around 10 years old. My mom signed me up for a Singer sewing machine class, and I learned how to make garments. Took home ec in junior high and high school. Absolutely loved it. Got involved in drama productions and doing the costumes, and then went to Cal Poly Pomona, where I have a degree in home economics. And the reason I chose Cal Poly Pomona was because I knew that they had a connection with Disneyland, and Disneyland would come onto the campus and they would hire interns. So I made sure I knew exactly what Disney was looking for as an intern so I could get that job. And so I applied for the internship and I got it. And so I started working for Disney back in 1982. I was really only a junior at the time in college, and I worked there for a year. And I learned every aspect of sewing, or every aspect of costuming, from I was a seamstress, I was a pattern maker, I was a buyer, I worked in management, I did a little bit of designing for them. I did some designing of some of the shows that they were doing. I absolutely loved it. It was like a dream come true. And so they then asked me if I would like to stay on as my career. And I said, of course, I can. I don't want to leave the magic. So I stayed on with Disney. I was there for close to 20 years. And I I loved every part of being a part of that organization and being a cast member with Disneyland. So,
Wow, that is so phenomenal. So
yeah.
I was thinking back, one thing in our journeys that is exactly the same is our moms both signed us up for a Singer sewing class when we were 10. So that's exactly what my mom did too. And
Well, my
so,
mom was a seamstress, but I don't think I took well to learning from her. So I think she said, oh, "Okay, I'm just going to put you in that class so that you can learn from somebody other than myself herself."
uh-huh.
So yeah. So, but I had a
Also,
lot of sorry.
oh no, I was just thinking too. Also, a friend of mine was actually a Disney princess back in probably about 86 or 87. You
Oh,
probably worked
I
on
was
her
yes, I probably worked on
costume.
her costume. Yes.
I'm gonna have to like reach out and see if I don't know, would she have connected with you and have known you?
Well, she might have if she was part of like if we had to do fittings for her,
Yeah,
or if she was part of a show, because I did quite a few entertainment
yeah.
shows where I worked on costumes for the shows. Yeah, it was,
I
yeah,
think I'm gonna have to reach out. I think she walked around and greeted people in costume.
uh-huh,
So, but I'm not
very
sure if
fun.
yeah. Wow, that is just an amazing journey. I love it.
Oh, I'll tell you everything. That's all right. So when I first started with them, I was a buyer. And so I would go into LA and I would purchase all the fabrics and the trims and the notions that were needed for the costumes. So I actually worked at a costume facility where we manufactured the costumes. It was actually located in Los Angeles. So I was downtown always doing all the buying. And so as I progressed in my career, what I really love to do is a designer would design a costume, whether it was for entertainment, meaning like a show or parade, or a cast member that maybe was a food seller, merchandise, or a ride operator. So maybe it was for a new part, maybe we were introducing new costumes for Tomorrowland. Or I also did the character costumes as well. So what the designer would do is she'd sketch the design of the costume, and then I would take a look at that sketch and I would determine how much yardage went into that costume and how much that yardage was going to cost per yard. I would determine the notions, the trim, the inner lining, everything that it took to make that costume that was sketched out. Then I would determine how much time was going to take to manufacture that costume, take into account the prototype phase, and then our employee benefits and our overhead. And I'd come up with a cost for each of those costumes. And then I would see it into production. And so that was really my
Wow.
forte because I loved all those details of everything, and I loved being able to be a part of that. So my first part of my career was uh, like cast member costumes and entertainment costumes. The second part of my career was actually with character costumes, or the last part of my career was with character costumes, and that was where my true love was with character costumes.
Oh.
So yeah, so
Yeah, Billy,
really
I'm so
fun.
glad you asked that
Yeah,
question.
yeah. Oh, there is. I mean, I remember like in 1984, we did a lot of things other than just for Disneyland. Like we did the Super Bowl one year. I can't remember what year, but we did the halftime show for Super Bowl one year. We did the 1984 Olympics. We did all of the different costumes for that for the opening ceremony. And I remember one afternoon, somebody from the Olympic Committee came to our factory and said, "I need these 6 tank tops embroidered with the Olympic rings." Well, there was just a few of us left at the factory that day, and so they said, "Nancy, can you embroider these quickly for us?" So we had like a 12 head Tajima embroidery machine, 6 color changer. Not that you need to know that, but so I knew how to operate it. So I put those 6 tank tops on the embroidery machine and embroidered the Olympic rings, not knowing who was going to be wearing them or what it was for. They couldn't tell us. But the day of opening ceremonies, there was a flag that was being carried. The American flag was being carried out, and there were people carrying it. And Bruce Jenner was one of them. He had the Olympic rings on his tank top that I embroidered. And then Ray Johnson had one on as well, and he's the one who lit the torch for the 1984 Olympics. So that was kind of cool to be a part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I
Oh.
have other little claim to fames while I was there that were really fun. So it was. People go, "Oh, it's so magical." It is magical. It's like it was fabulous to be a part of the community at Disney. So it was awesome.
Wow. Oh, this is making me want to go to Disneyland.
Yeah.
So,
I know. I have an annual pass. I just was there last week.
how are you?
So yeah.
Oh,
I know I was a few months shy of getting my silver pass because you can get a silver pass after 20 years, but I had an amazing opportunity to change careers, so I did. So when I did retire from my second career, my husband said, "Do you want a big party? What would you like?" And I said, "Oh, I'd like an annual pass to Disneyland for the rest of my life."
right.
Okay.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's kind of move into your quilting journey now and how you came to be a quilter after such an exciting
So
career.
I've always sewn garments, and that was what I did. I sewed garments for as long as I can remember, and then my youngest son Colin turned 2, and I had a girlfriend that I had connected with while I was working for Disney. She actually sold me all my inner linings and everything for the costumes, and she said, there is this gal I've met, a designer called Tawny White, and she's out in Irvine, and she's offering a class on quilting. Would you like to take the class with me? And I had never quilted. I didn't own a rotary cutter. I didn't have a mat. I had nothing. And she says, "Would you like to take the class with me?" I said, "Oh, absolutely. Sounds like fun. I'm going to do this." So I went out there every Sunday to work on this Christmas quilt. It was a combination of hand applique, and then we also did cross stitch. So we had the quilt with cross stitch and hand applique. And so I finished the quilt within a year before Christmas. So that was an accomplishment. And I even quilted it myself. And I had the bug. I couldn't stop. I was like, okay, I think I just need to start collecting fabric and learning more about quilting. But because I was working full time and had a family that I was raising, I didn't really have the time to invest in quilting. But I still probably finished maybe a quilt a year, worked on a quilt for a while, but I never lost the love of quilting. I just continued to just kind of collect fabric over the years. And then in 2005, my first husband passed away, and it really kind of changed my look on life. And I thought, you know what? I am gonna that's when I needed something. I guess as therapy, I needed something to take care of the loss that of losing him. So I started quilting, really quilting again. And I have a group of girlfriends that I have known for 30 years. We were all pregnant with our kids together, and we all knew each other from church. And we decided to form a group of quilters. So we have been quilting for probably the last 17 years. We get together once a month, and that's really when my quilting journey really started, and just it kind of brought us together as friends. And then we started learning new things, and we just started going to quilt shows. And again, I always was the winner of who bought the most merchandise at all the shows we went to. But I just started collecting and learning as much as I could about quilting. And then the last 9 years, I've been retired for about 8 or 9 years, and I have been sewing nonstop. I spend almost every day in my sewing room, and
Oh.
I love it.
I love it too. I love seeing the things that you make and your attention to detail. And I just think that you are absolutely fabulous in
Thank
everything
you.
that you
Thank
make.
you.
So,
Thank you.
and you're also very organized too. So I would love to hear kind of a little bit about how you keep everything organized, your project tracking, your anything you want to share about your organizing. Because I mean, we can see looking behind you, you have all the things. And I should mention also that you cross stitch quite a bit too.
Yes, I do.
So
Mhm.
yeah, and we're going to talk about that after
Okay.
organizing. So
So organizing. Okay. So I know that a lot of quilters journal. And I have a really hard time journaling, to be honest. I try. I've bought every journal there is because I love them. They're so cute. They're so well put together. And I really wish I could be a journaler. But I love diving into the project. So what I do now is I have a list of my all of my projects that I am going to start or have started. And to me, that is the easiest way for me to keep track of what I'm doing. And the other thing that I do is I love the project box, the clear plastic project boxes I get them at Michael's. And I will put everything for that project in that project box, and I always have a label on them so I know exactly what's in the box. Now, if I am making a sample for, like if I'm making a sample for you, then what I'll do is I then know what my deadline is, and that goes above anything else that I am just currently working on. So then I'll work with specific dates as to when it needs to be done, and I put the other sewing aside. But as far as all of my projects, I have a list of them. I have pretty much where I'm at with them, what fabric line I'm using. I just finished the pumpkin and vine quilt, and I was like, oh, okay. And that was like, it wasn't on my list, but I was like, I just love it. And I was kind of looking around my sewing room. I'm like, okay, I can use Cozy Up for that. And I was like, do I have everything? And of course, because I find all the
Right.
I
You
collect
had it.
fabrics. I had it. I even have enough for the backing and for the binding. So
Oh,
then
good.
I can put that on my list, and I can say, okay, I have all my materials for what I need to complete the quilt. Um, so I do love using my project boxes. Kind of how I spend my day in my sewing room and how I stay organized is I what I like to do is I like variety because it's hard for me if all I do all day is just prepare my fabric. That gets boring to me. So I like it where I'll kind of set a mental timer. Like I'll say if I get in my sewing room at 7 in the morning, I'll say, okay, for the next 2 hours, I'm going to prep my fabric. So what I'll do to prep my fabric is I don't starch my fabric like a lot of quilters do. I use the magic quilting and crafting spray. I
Yes.
love that.
And
Okay.
I learned about it from you.
Yeah.
So, and I remember we talked about it at Garden of Quilts this September. Have
Yes.
you tried the other type
I
yet?
haven't. I haven't, and I've
Okay.
been looking for it. I haven't been able to find it. I'm probably
Okay.
going to have to go online and find it, but I was looking at some quilt shops and I did not find it. So
Okay.
my only like I used it that day at the quilt when I was taking your class.
Yeah.
So I was sharing with you that I have arthritis in my hands, and so certain movements trigger or cause a little bit of discomfort. So I have to be kind of careful on the type of triggers that are used on certain spray bottles and things. So I don't know how that's going to work. I'll have to try it. The
Yeah.
only thing I think that's really good about that new spray is that I think it has a better mist coverage. I don't know if that
Coverage.
makes sense because I
Yes.
find with the liquid, I sometimes the mist only goes in that little spot.
Right.
It
Right.
doesn't like mist the whole piece of fabric. So
Yes.
that's why I have to do it. I use what I do is use that spray twice. I spray it once, use a hot iron that doesn't have steam, and I press that out. Then I lift up the fabric just to kind of um, uh, get it away from the ironing board. Then I put it back down, and then I spray it again. And then I use a hot iron again. And then it's not like stiff like a board, but it's a lot firmer than just the fabric before it's been sprayed.
Right. Yeah. I've really enjoyed using it since I noticed a difference in what you were sewing for me. And that's when I asked you about it. And I have really loved it too.
Yeah, because it really helps in the piecing and the
Yes.
accuracy of the piecing.
Yes.
I really like that product a lot. Um, so then what I'll do is I will prep the fabric maybe for a couple hours, and then I also use project board. So I'll use like a project board like this, and
Yeah.
what I'll do is I'll cut out a lot of blocks, and then I'll have like a stack of project boards. Like right now, I have like 10 project boards stacked with 10 different blocks that I'm going to be working on. So then what I can do is I can move from prepping the fabric. I always have my machine on, and then I can start sewing on that block that's already been prepped for me, or I can switch back to cutting out a few more blocks. So I kind of do a variety. Some days when it depends on the day and depends on the project. I might just cut all day long. Like I prep the fabric the day before, and the next day I just might cut the entire day so I can stack up all of my project boards with
Right.
the different blocks. And then that way I can come in my sewing room at any time, even if I only have 15 minutes. I can still
Right.
turn my machine on, and you can get a lot done in 15 minutes.
Oh, yeah. I
So that,
agree. Yeah.
yes. So I feel good because you feel like you had some sense of accomplishment, even if that's all you had in your day was to get to the sewing machine for 15 minutes.
I want to back up and just ask you specifically on your list, do you keep it, do you leave spaces to put underneath each
Oh,
project or yeah, how do you, or
yes.
does each project have a page in a notebook or?
Right now, it's just in a list, and I usually have about 5 or 6 lines below it just to kind of make notes. Or if I
Oh,
need to purchase let's say I need to purchase the binding, I don't have it, then I'll make a note, or I'll put the note like what day I purchased, like ordered from Fat Quarter Shop, what day I ordered it.
right.
And then I'll know, okay, it's on its way. One of the things I wish I would have started, like when I started quilting, like long time ago, I wish I would have taken a photograph of every quilt and made like an album of every quilt and a story of every quilt. I really wish I would have done that. And I admire quilters that do that. And that's one of the things I wished I would have done. I guess it's never too late to start something like that.
Right.
But
Yeah. Well, and that's actually what led me to my blog was like you, I was people had gifted me quilt journals before I started record and I the same thing I could not use them. I don't
yeah,
know why, but I was also starting to just panic that I had made all of these things and given them away and there was no record of any of them. And that's really why I started my blog in 2008 was
yeah,
because I couldn't do the journal, which is so weird because I journal about other things and I love to write and
yeah,
but yeah, I can totally see but now with the blog I do pretty much since 2008, have photographs of most everything I've
yeah,
made.
yeah.
Yeah, but I started quilting in the mid 90s, so
Hmm.
I missed a lot of stuff that
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. I have missed a lot. I've missed all of it. No.
Yeah. Well, but now you have your Instagram
Yes,
too.
yes.
So,
And I do love Instagram, but I have a lot more photos that I've taken of my quilts, but just haven't posted. And I really need to be a little bit more proactive as to posting some of my finished quilts. So
oh yeah.
that's
Okay, so we mentioned cross stitch, and maybe you could just. I'm always interested what percentage of your time is spent with cross stitch as compared to quilting. I know we all see Kimberly Jolly doing a lot of cross stitch too, and a lot of people like Lori Holt is doing a lot of crochet now, making granny squares.
yes.
So, just kind of what percent of your time do you spend with cross stitch, and what are kind of your thoughts on cross
Well,
stitch as your hobby
well,
too?
I started cross stitching actually probably 40 years ago, like way before, like probably in the 80s, I started cross stitching. And I just loved it because it's something that I can take with me. And I love it because I love counted cross stitch. I don't like the printed canvas because I feel limited. Like, what if I don't get it in that certain spot? So,
Right.
counted cross stitch is, I just enjoy it. I love math, and I think that's why I love counted cross stitch. And I pick it up and I put it down. And then in 2005, I really started picking it up again. And I did a lot of Lizzie Kate patterns and I just loved all of her stuff. So I started picking up cross stitch again and getting it framed. And then once I really started quilting again, I stopped, I put it aside. I still had it, I still had all my patterns, but I put it aside. And then Kimberly Jolly, when she brought out cross stitch and Lori Holt started bringing out her cross stitch patterns, I got hooked again. And what I love is watching what everyone's starting to make these project bags that go with their cross stitch. So then I kind of decided it was time I started making project bags to match my cross stitch. And so the cross stitch, I probably spend about an hour a day on it. I
Okay.
usually do it in the evenings when my husband and I are watching TV because it's just I can still watch a show and I can cross stitch at the same time. So I usually cross stitch in the evenings about an hour or so, or I take it with me wherever I go. So if I'm traveling, I'm on a plane, I'm cross stitching. If we're on a road trip, I can cross stitch in the car. So I will cross stitch in the car. So it's not something like I sit down in my sewing room and go, okay, I'm going to spend an hour this morning on cross stitch. I don't want it to take away from my quilting journey
Right.
because I love being in my room sewing, especially I'm really blessed because I have large picture window, and so there's so much natural light that comes in for sewing. So I want to spend as much time in my room sewing and less time cross stitching. So that's why I usually do the cross stitching in the evening, or I'll do it when I'm traveling.
That sounds kind of the way you approach cross stitching is how I approach my grandmother's flower garden blocks
Oh,
because they're very portable. I can do them while I'm watching TV.
yeah,
And yeah, I've done them on planes and
yeah,
boats and
yeah,
football
exactly.
games, soccer meets.
Yes,
But
yeah.
yeah, so love that. Okay, just kind of like a little run through of your favorite. I have like some quick questions.
Okay,
Oh, actually, wait, I have something at the bottom that I wanted to do before the quick questions. Bag making. I know you are also a prolific bag making, and I love bag making too. And Nancy gifted me a beautiful project bag that I love. And just any tips on bag making that you want to share? And I know you took Minky's class
yes,
too
I did. Oh,
at
that was
Garden of
so much
Quilts.
fun.
Oh,
I can't
yeah.
wait to make another bag.
Yes. And I came home, she gifted me a couple of her patterns, and I made her quilter's big tote right after I got home and just love that.
Yeah,
Watched her video 3 times while I was making it.
yeah.
But
When I made her bag in class, I had already watched her video like twice before I got to class because I'm like, okay, I want to kind of know what I'm doing.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I want to make that one that you made too. That is such
Oh,
a cute shaped
yes.
pouch.
Yeah, it's really fun. So,
Yeah. I'm still trying to get a few more things made for my quilt market booth, and that might be one of them.
oh, that'd be really cute.
Yeah.
I know it's hard because, I love quilting. I love making quilts. So
Right.
it's like bag making's fun, really fun, but it takes away from putting my quilts together. So I've got to, okay, how do I balance that? But let's see, tips about bag making. Well, I like using the little mini charm packs. That's what I use if I'm building my bag with the patchwork look. I like using
Yes.
little mini charm packs. So what I will do a lot of times is if I see a quilt line that I really love, but I can't see how it's going to be made into a quilt, I think, oh, but it can be made into a really cute bag. So then I'll buy a little mini charm pack of that. And then I'll buy like 2 to 3 complementing fabrics to make a bag. So I'll buy maybe a fabric to go on the header of the bag and a fabric to go on the back and then a fabric for the lining. So then I might not be making a quilt out of that fabric, but at least I'm making a bag. And so I can still enjoy that fabric, but enjoy it through a bag. I don't know if that
Yeah.
makes sense, but that's why a
Yes.
lot of times I have variety of bags and I've never made a quilt with those fabrics.
Yeah. I love that. That's kind of what I do too. With table runners too.
Oh, yes.
I even do it with our own fabrics. Even after I've designed projects digitally on the computer, when we get those strike offs, I will just, Chelsea always teases me, but I'll make a table runner because I want to work with those fabrics in real time, in real life, and
Yes.
see how they go together before I start doing my quilts, which means that sometimes I change things up in my quilts after
Mhm.
I've, designed them.
Yeah.
So, okay, I love that. Yeah, Nan, your bags that I've seen are just gorgeous.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so favorite notion. And if
Okay.
you have more than one, that's okay.
Okay. I have more than one.
Okay.
Okay. So first, let's talk about cutting.
Okay.
Okay. So I use a stripology ruler for all my cutting. I love my stripology ruler. I have all of them. My favorite is the one that is like 12 and a half, I think, by 12 and a half. That's my
Okay.
favorite one. I use it for all my cutting.
Okay.
Uh, I got introduced to it like I don't know how long ago, maybe however long ago it came out, and I was like, oh, this is like a game changer for me.
Yeah.
So that's how I use the stripology ruler. So that's my cutting tool. Oh, and you already know what my favorite pressing.
Yes.
Yeah, this is my favorite. This is my favorite pressing
Yes.
starch. Okay, and then when it comes to pressing, I love this. It's got a wool mat on a piece of wood. It's kind of shaped like this. This is what I use for pressing all my seams open. And why I like using this is because when I press the seam open, the heat from the iron is absorbed into the wool of this mat, and it allows your seams to be really nice and flat once they're pressed open. So I love this. This is my pressing. And the other thing I love is my clapper. I use this a lot. My friends make fun of me because I have so many of them. One year, when we went to Garden of the Quilts and we were going to a variety of different quilt shops, I collected clappers that were made for each of the stores. So I
Oh.
have quite an assortment of clappers. I love
Uh-huh.
it. Okay, so that's pressing. And then let's see here. Now, I love a project board. And my
Yes.
other two tools that I love to use is I always have my stiletto. This is a very old stiletto. Okay, but this is the one I use. So I love my stiletto because it's like a third hand for me when I'm sewing. And it really helps me to guide the fabric through the machine. And it just allows me to be more accurate on my piecing. I love making piece blocks. That's like, it's like putting a puzzle together. And the more pieces, the more fun it is for me to put together. But I always need this in order to help me to guide the fabric through the machine.
So you use the stiletto. See, I really got converted to using a stiletto with my bag making from Patterns by Annie.
Yes.
Annie often uses a stiletto, but I've not really used it in my piecing that much. So you just keep it by your sewing machine, and when
Yeah.
you've got a lot of little pieces to join together, you're using that to
Yeah.
help.
I'm using
I
that to help. And it's like it holds it in place and it just helps me guide it through the machine. Yeah, I've used it like on my machine when I'm sewing. I have my scissors and my stiletto. Those are the two
okay.
things I have sitting right there.
Okay.
And sometimes I have to move them down because they're on the um, by the table of the machine. I'm like, oh, they're in the way. But my
Yeah.
stiletto is always there.
I
So yeah,
love that. I'm going to put my stiletto over by my machine so that I will
it just
remember.
helps in guiding. So, and the other thing, I don't know if you've ever used this, but this is acorn glue. I don't know if you've ever used this.
I have some of that.
Oh, I love using this. So
Okay.
if you're putting like a little, you're building a piece block together, and you have like a little 1 inch square and you need to sew the corner, I just put a little dot of the glue there and it holds it in place. And then I just make sew my stitch line, and it allows the fabric so it does not shift. It stays in place. I really like it. Now, the only negative to using this is if, let's say, you're sewing a lot of, you want to save some of your little scrap triangles to make like a triangle quilt. You really
Right.
can't. You've used the glue, you pretty much
Okay.
can't reuse the fabric.
Right.
But I use this for sewing all of my squares. Like if I'm doing a half square triangle on something, or if I'm making a flying geese, I'll use this on the corners to set my
Oh.
fabrics together. And
Oh.
it really works nicely. And then you're not pinning, because sometimes when you pin, it kind of distorts it a little bit and it does kind of shift the fabric a little bit. But by using the acorn glue, it doesn't shift the fabric. That's what I found.
Okay. So just a question on flying geese. Do you make them bigger and trim them down? Or do you usually just do the exact size and then use the glue?
I use the exact size and use the
Okay.
glue. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, but I do use this ruler. I love this. Okay. I have tried uh, half square I've tried the paper. I love it.
Right.
I've tried all the different ways of either making half square triangles, flying geese. I've tried all those. But, and I've used them all in all different methods. But one of my favorite things when I'm making half square triangles is I love this ruler. It's by Quilt in a Day. I use the 6.5 inch triangle square up ruler. I love this ruler. I use it
Okay.
like during the pandemic when a lot of quilters were putting like classes on or things on YouTube.
Right.
I watched a little class by, I can't even remember who it was, and they were using this ruler, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to get that, because I was buying a lot of things during that time. I thought I
Yeah.
got to get this ruler, and
Yes.
I love it because it does make my squares perfectly square once I'm
Okay.
doing my half square triangles. So
I
that's
think I
what I
have
use.
that ruler somewhere. I'm going to have to pull it out.
But I use that a lot. So yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Awesome.
I have a lot of favorite tools, but those are the ones I love.
Oh, that was so insightful and helpful. I learned some new things there. So thank you. I'm sure. Now, this is a harder one. Do you have a favorite quilt block?
Okay. I Well, it's hard to tell. I love churn dash. Because with churn dash, they're fun to make, and you can put anything you want in the center. It could be a
Right.
solid center, or you could build a block within a block, and I'd love that.
Right.
But I guess I don't really have like a favorite quilt block. For me, quilting, for me, piecing is like kind of like shared, was like putting a puzzle together. So the more variety, the more in that quilt block, I love just putting together. So like on your row by row quilt, the one that I was doing when we were taking that class, um,
Yes.
oh, I love building all those blocks. To me, that was just, I love row by row quilts. I love things that there's a little variety in each of the blocks. So it's not like I'm sewing the same block over and over. I love that too. But for
Right.
me, I just like variety. So, and I
Awesome.
do like making house blocks though. Those are really
Okay.
fun to make because then you could like change up the doors or the windows or,
Right.
it's just, anyways, I just, it's hard to narrow down one block, specific
Right.
block.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite block?
Kind of similar to you. I love churn dash for the same reason that you do. And, if you look at my patterns, I've got several patterns where you do something different with churn dash. I do love log cabins
Mhm.
uh, and stars,
Yeah.
and then houses. So I guess those are the top four.
Yeah. Well, I had never, well, I haven't really done a lot of log cabin quilts, but I had so much fun making the log cabin quilt for the sew along. Um,
Right.
and that was really fun to be able to put something in the middle of the middle
Yeah.
square of the
I see
cabin.
yours on the wall
I
back there.
know.
So that's that's super fun.
Yeah.
Okay, and then finally, Pat, I know you're kind of like me where you will often take a bigger pattern and make it into a wall hanging. So,
Yeah.
but do you have a favorite size to make if you're going to make a quilt? Would you rather make a bed quilt or a wall hanging, or does it just depend on the pattern?
It depends on the pattern. But I have found lately that I have so many large quilts and I do a lot of block of the months. And so those block of the months end up being really large. And so those I work on every month. I'll do a block for each of those months. So by the end of the 12 months, you have this beautiful big quilt. So in between those, I like making smaller quilts. I
Yeah.
think the size I like best is probably 36 by 36 or 48 by 48. That's about
Yeah.
and then like again, then I still get to put my hands on that fabric and enjoy all the fabric in that particular line. And then I can finish it quickly. Not that it has to be done in a race, but I can finish
Right.
it and feel a lot of satisfaction from having that quilt. Still incorporating all those blocks, but in a smaller scale, which I
Right.
like. That's what I did with I did that with the pumpkin and vine. I made the smaller one. And then
Right.
I did that with fireflies because that was really fun to make the fireflies in a smaller block and a smaller
Yes.
quilt. So,
Oh, that this has just been so much fun and I've learned a lot. I am going to move that stiletto over to my
good,
sewing
good.
machine the next time I sew. Yeah, I just appreciate this so much. Is there anything else you want to share or
Well, just
that
thank you so
we
much for this opportunity. I have loved sewing so much and quilting, and I was making so many quilts for all these years. And then when I had the opportunity to make the samples for you, that was like a dream come true because it was like I was able to hand you over what I love to do, and that you can have it. And that has just been the biggest privilege I've ever had. So
Oh
thank
my
you
goodness.
so much. It's such a joy.
I have appreciated it so much. I think for several years, I did samples for Camille Ross Kelly and for Lori Holt and for Joanna Figueroa. And I think for so long, I just thought I can do this all myself. And with so many things going on, and it has just been a blessing to be able to have help. So,
Thank you. I know my friend said, my girlfriends will say, well, do you feel bad when you send Sherri the quilt and you don't get it back? And I said, no, I feel like such joy because I want her to enjoy this quilt. And it's just like I have loved putting the quilt together and touching the fabric and sewing it. And I am a perfectionist. And so I do just love being able to share my creativity or my art with you. So
oh,
that's
I
really. good.
I'm just so appreciative, and
Thank you. Thank you.
thank you so much.
So
This is
I have one little tidbit here.
oh,
So,
okay.
okay. I was talking to my niece, her name is Joy, and I said, "Okay, Joy, I want to leave a little tidbit of something." And I always tell my friends, enjoy the journey. And so for me, quilting is such a journey. So enjoy the journey of quilting, and don't make a race of it. Just really just enjoy creating, because creating just is such a it just makes you feel so good when you're able to create and have a beautiful product at the end. So
Yeah.
that's my words of wisdom.
Oh, I love that. That is the perfect way to end our interview. And it's not an interview, it's a conversation.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
yes,
Exactly.
I just love that. So, and I think sometimes as quilters too, we are inundated with all of the images from the internet and YouTube and Instagram, and we think we have to make. So I
Yeah.
love the idea of slowing down and enjoying this journey. So,
Yes, exactly. So
but,
thank you so much.
oh, thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's it for our today's interview. More like a conversation with a friend. I hope you loved it. I enjoyed the conversation so much and learned a lot of things. I actually think that most of our listeners and viewers will have found some really fun and interesting things today. We will be back for our next podcast episode on Monday, November 11th, and we will be sharing all things quilt market in that episode. Billy will even be able to participate in that conversation with his experience as a first-time attendee. So once again, thanks so much for stopping by.